In today's socially connected and fast-paced world, you will want to succeed and stand out from the competition. Your host, Jonathan Butler, is an award-winning chef, restaurateur and author, and is known for shaking up the everyday within our highly competitive industry. Welcome to the Disruptive Restaurateur podcast.
Welcome to the Disruptive Restaurateur. I'm your host, John Butler, and today I'm talking to Zoey Henderson, who is the founder of Clean Slate, who are a consultancy sort of focusing on low and no and sustainable business. Zoey, how are we doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome to the podcast. That's great. So tell us a bit about your background. Tell us about Clean Slate and what is it? What's your mission?
Yeah, I've been in hospitality now for coming up to 20 years. Started off when I was a teenager, working in pubs on my school holidays. And then I kind of moved into advertising and branding for a few years. And then ultimately came back to hospitality. I launched with a partner. We launched a juice bar cafe about 7 and 8 years ago now. And took that from one site to 3 sites and then moved on to my next project. I set up a artisan coffee shop and kind of focused on the coffee world for a few years, and just loved the buzz of starting up businesses. I've always loved hospitality and serving people and being part of that experience. And since kind of finishing off my own things, I've worked with some larger brands, looking after their restaurants, venues, festivals. And now I've gone back into consultancy where I'm helping people to launch their businesses, work out solutions for problems. And over the last couple of years, I found myself coming into the world of no and low, which we wouldn't have been having a conversation about a few years ago. No and low alcohol as a category is pretty new, but it's a small and strong segment that's just growing. That's what I'm kind of focusing on, helping brands get exposure, helping businesses integrate no and low into their offering, and kind of looking at growing within that segment. Yeah,
and obviously, so like I say, it's suddenly, I suppose, in the last few years, obviously, Seedlip launched about 4 or 5 years ago, and then and obviously, they've done pretty well because they got investment from Guinness, and you kind of think, well, that's quite a statement, isn't it? And obviously, even this year, back in January, we saw Brewdog launch their alcohol-free bar, which, and I think the interesting thing from my point of view, when you kind of see things like that, it's not like they went, oh, we're just going to extend the offer that we've got in our existing pubs. We're actually going to make a statement and open a completely, alcohol-free venue. So that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Really interesting, and it was interesting that the market's got to that point where that's now considered a viable business model, because the no and low sector, it is a small part of the wet offering in a venue, but I think people are now realizing it's something that it's growing, and it's something that you can't ignore, because you'll lose customers if you have a party of 5 and a couple of them don't want to drink, and the venues that have the better non-alcoholic offering, it's going to help bring in customers, and you'll be losing customers if you don't facilitate for them. And I think what's interesting with Brewdog is they decided to go, right, we're going to set up a whole venue, and I presume this is now going to roll out into, they're going to have more of the alcohol-free version. But Seedlip were great. They were instrumental in setting it off, and people suddenly going, oh, a non-alcoholic spirit is now a thing. They were there from the beginning, and now obviously they've had some great investment. So their marketing budget has been really able to push the non-alcoholic message and kind of really push it into the mainstream. It's been an interesting few years where it was just Seedlip for a long time. But we're seeing lots of really interesting brands coming in now.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and it's I suppose the it's not this sort of, well, the only non-alcoholic offering we've got is your Coke and your lemonade or whatever, or your juices. They are actually, these are distilled spirits, botanical type drinks, aren't they? And there is plenty of flavour, and I suppose there's now opening up an even bigger sector in terms of obviously then what you can do with these things.
Yeah. I mean, people are now looking for, we've got it. It's been a stepped process. Initially, there was that struggle with consumers where if it didn't contain alcohol, you expected the price point to be a lot lower. The irony is the thing that people attribute the most value to and the thing that actually costs the least within the product is the alcohol. But somehow people were quite slow to get their head round, you know, if I'm buying a gin and tonic, I'm spending £6.50, but it doesn't actually have gin in it. And there was that kind of that tussle. We're still seeing that a little bit, but it is getting a lot better where people are realizing that these products, they match up to their alcoholic brothers and sisters in distilling processes, in quality of botanicals, in their beautiful branding and bottles, their marketing. You know, the liquid when you're producing a drink is probably the lowest cost. You know, it's everything else that goes around it. You know, it's the sourcing, the distribution, the branding, the marketing, and those are exactly the same for the non-alcoholic versions. And it's interesting you say that now people are kind of, it's the second step. Okay, there is more than Coca-Cola and lemonade to offer to drink. Brilliant. But what else am I getting from my drink? You know, I like the buzz of the alcohol, but I've now realized I don't like the next day. I've now realized for whatever reason, it's not that great for me, but I still want that little something, that little extra they get in my drink. And this is where we're seeing functional drinks coming in. So adding active herbs and botanicals from CBD to turmeric to, you know, medicinal mushrooms into drinks and spirits that are then having a functional quality. So you're getting a non-alcoholic drink, but you're getting that little bit extra. And suddenly the category and the drink sector broadens because it's no longer about the haves or have not, the with alcohol or without alcohol. It's about the actual product and the complexity of the drink. And so you would rate a non-alcoholic cocktail as complex and interesting as a cocktail with alcohol. The alcohol will just be another ingredient that you're putting into the mix. And both will be regarded as kind of equal in terms of their value. And we are seeing that. We're seeing offerings in, you know, a lot of the big venues. Soho House Group's got a great non-alcoholic offering. We're seeing little independent cocktail bars having some really good non-alcoholic offerings now. This summer, everything was set to kind of be the real push for it. So we are on a bit of a hibernation, but I don't think that's going to affect the category as a whole.
No, because to say people want the theatre, don't they? So if you're making a cocktail, you know, whether it's got the alcohol in it or not, you know, if like I say, if you've got the you know, we've got the spirits, but it's just a non-alcoholic spirit. It's just that whole theatre that goes behind that, you know, making that drink and putting it together, doesn't it? And that's the kind of, I suppose, you know, before now, we didn't have that theatre, did we? It was just, well, the non-alcoholic range we've got is, you know, down there.
Yeah, and with fruit juices, and, you know, you go to a beautiful cocktail bar, you know, the energy and the expense that goes into designing the environment that you're in, you know, and then to just be mix something that's a couple of juices put together, that was never going to help grow the category. It was never going to help grow demand. And if you weren't drinking alcohol, you'd either go, oh, just not going to go out, or you'd be pretty miserable drinking soda and lime, or, you know, maybe some kind of funky juice for half the evening. And it just really diminished the experience of going into that bar. And I think vendors are realizing that now. You know, they're about, it's not just a tangible product in a restaurant, it's the experience. And you want that flair, you want that excitement, you want them to take down a beautiful bottle from the shelf and mixing it in, and all interesting shrubs and herbs and botanicals that are going into it. And you can get those really exciting flavor profiles now within non-alcoholic serves, which pre-seedlip you just couldn't get.
No. I say, you know, and say some of the branding is absolutely really, really strong, isn't it? It sort of looks really, really good. So that's you know, pretty amazing. And the beers are coming along as well, aren't they? They've got a bit of flavour now.
The beer's the thing that got me, because I was never a beer drinker. I'm almost 85 days into 100 days no alcohol at the moment, which I don't know is a good or a bad thing, but feels pretty good. And I was never a beer drinker, but I'm now a fully paid up member of the non-alcoholic beer fan club. And I've just found they are hitting the flavor profiles in terms of non-alcoholic products, for me, better than anything else. There are a lot of really great spirits now as well, but there's something about the theatre as well of cracking that beer, you know, or being in an environment with someone where you can just have a pint. We're seeing a lot more pubs putting non-alcoholic beers on draft, and in fact, Bristol Council put through a law that all pubs from, I think, next year must have at least one non-alcoholic beer on draft to try and help designated drivers and such. And I think we're going to see more of these incentives, because you almost don't have to raise a question. If you're holding a pint, you don't have to have those questions of, oh, why aren't you drinking? What aren't you drinking? It's, people won't second guess. They just think you're having a pint of beer. And it's that same, cracking a cold beer out of the fridge, the clink of the bottle. There's a lot of ceremony that goes along with our drinking habits as well. And I think the non-alcoholic beer has kind of nailed it. And there's some really great products. There's something like 150 non-alcoholic beers we now have globally, and there are a lot of countries in Europe that were taking the lead with that. Spain has been taking the lead in non-alcoholic beers for quite a few years now, in Germany, and we're seeing a lot more traditional brewing techniques now put into non-alcoholic beers, and of course then de-alcoholized, which is quite a tricky process, but it does mean that you're getting something that really does taste like beer.
And so, your advice to operators, let's say the traditional ones, maybe the smaller independents that, kind of thinking, I don't need non-alcoholic stuff or low alcohol or no alcohol. What's your kind of advice to them? They need to get on board, really, don't they?
Yeah, and I think we see it the same way as with plant-based food. Even out into the regions, you now have at least one menu item that's vegetarian or can be vegan, whereas before there was nothing. And certainly any venue within a city or an urban space has a really good split of vegan and vegetarian and regular meals. And I think people are now realizing, before they couldn't really give that offering on their menus because there just weren't the products to support them. Their chefs didn't know how to cook plant-based food. There weren't that many great plant-based alternatives. And it's the same with non-alcohol. It's like there weren't very good non-alcoholic beers. There weren't any spirits. So it was hard to kind of put an offering out because you didn't have the product support. It was now we have great product support. And I think that people will realize, just get a couple of non-alcoholic beers in your fridge, have a non-alcoholic spirit. You can easily just swap out a traditional spirit for a regular one in your regular cocktail. So it doesn't take a lot of extra training to begin with for your bar teams. You're making a gin and tonic, swap it out for non-alcoholic gin. You want to make a mojito, put in a non-alcoholic rum. So we have the products to be able to do that now. And I think your customers will respond to you. You think that there's no need for it, but it's like, until you give them that need, you could have half of your customers that would really quite fancy something non-alcoholic one day. It's not going to stop them coming into you, or maybe it will, but you won't know until they don't come. And if you have that offering, I think you'll see lots more people uptaking. So it's something that definitely, there's no excuse not to integrate it now.
Is there a particular demographic that seem to be pushing it more, or is it pretty much across the board?
I think it's interesting. It's pretty much split into some chunky segments, which is great because it means there's something for everybody. I think we're seeing a lot of younger millennials, people who are now, they live a healthy lifestyle. They're fully aware of the health implications of not drinking. A lot of younger people are living their life on social media. So the whole kind of mirage of getting drunk and getting, how it used to be maybe 20 years ago, you can't quite get away with. So you have a lot of younger people who are very aware of not wanting to get schlossed all the time and fall out of clubs looking all squiffy. Then you've got kind of people who are now starting families and maybe have partied lots in their uni days, and in their 20s, they're now in their mid-30s with kids and realize they can't have a hangover and deal with a toddler. And then you've got an older generation who have got some now health issues because of the lifestyle that they've been living. So they're becoming more conscious of the fact that they don't want to go into their 70s and 80s with bad health. So they're now getting more conscious about how to make sure that they're fighting fit. So we've got quite a broad spectrum. I think at each end, the parallel ends, the very young kids who are kind of, 18, 19, probably don't care because they're just having fun. And someone who's a lot older probably doesn't care because they've lived their life and they're pretty happy where they are. But it's great because a big chunk of consumers are going to be looking for these alternatives, and for different reasons, which means there's a nice segmentation for brands to hit on occasions and on demographics. So I think there's plenty of consumers for everybody to find that niche for your product.
Yeah. No, and like I say, I think got a bit of feedback then. So for me, obviously, one reason why we spoke recently, obviously, I'm working with a client who's putting in a completely dry bar into their, their unit, which will be a really interesting concept and see how that kind of develops. And I think it's, for me, it's almost, are we going to, you talked about, with Brewdog, and it wasn't a case of, let's just extend the range, let's make a completely alcoholic free venue, because it's almost becomes that, I suppose, you've got to start to remove that social pressure as well, haven't you? Because obviously if you go to somewhere where there is alcohol, the temptation's there, isn't it? But I think more and more people are going to want to go to places where there isn't the alcohol.
Yeah, it's a big thing, and it's either, if you're not drinking for religious reasons, then you don't want to be around alcohol, and that's completely fair enough. But also, if you're trying to not drink alcohol, there is that social pressure of one, just looking at everyone drinking it and thinking, God, I really want to have it, or the questioning from people. When I started doing my 100 days, I was constantly asked, are you pregnant? No, I'm just doing 100 days, not drinking. People are always, why? And sometimes you're in the mood to kind of go, actually, do you know what? I'm doing this challenge. I feel it. And sometimes you just think, I just want to chill out. And, I don't want to have to answer all these questions. So I think having that flexibility of having more bars that are fully non-alcoholic, and there hasn't been a viable market segment for it. Our restaurant industry is built on, especially in London, extremely high business rates, extremely high rent. Chefs want to create the best product they can out their kitchen. You want to supplement having a big brigade downstairs, and how you do that is by the markup on your bar and on your wet-led sales. The industry isn't really geared up for the non-alcoholic market until the value in the non-alcoholic product increases, and then your margin's looking much better. So I think there's going to be more non-alcoholic bars open, and I think we're going to see venues in the future, their wet sales are going to be very much more 50-50 of non-alcoholic to alcoholic. And once those price point matches, it's not so much of a dint. It's not suddenly going, you have to reduce your bar to 50% softs. You're just having a different product introduced. So it's a much more viable option for restaurateurs and bar owners as well.
Yeah. And do you think, with the UK, are we a little bit behind, sort of Europe and sort of the rest of the world in this kind of segment? Because you go out to to Europe a lot, and, they don't seem to drink the way we drink, is that the reason, or is it just?
I think, we have certainly a different relationship to alcohol than they do on the continent. It is very much more that binge culture and that maybe excess culture, where it's not long dinners where you pace yourself and the children are drinking little bits of wine with their dinners from a young age. And we have a very different cultural relationship with alcohol. So I think for countries on the continent to integrate some more non-alcoholic options, it seems a little bit easier. But I actually think London is certainly leading the way in the no and low market in terms of aggressively in our bars, having completely non-alcoholic bars and putting more non-alcoholic items on the menu, and certainly the brands that have been developed. And there are a few tiny pockets in America, but actually I think for once the UK is doing pretty well in leading that space in terms of the innovation that's coming out. We do live in a bit of a bubble in London. We're extremely lucky. I'm extremely lucky that you have so many different operators around you. You have so many different choices. You can have any ethnicity of cuisine, vegan, alcohol, no alcohol, and it's all around you. But we are seeing it creeping out into the regions as well. There are a few good non-alcoholic bars and lower ABV bars coming in Manchester, Leeds, and I think we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, so I suppose, bit of advice then to operators at the minute, the ones who haven't necessarily sort of looked at it, bit of downtime at the moment. Good time to look at it.
Yeah, I think it's a good time for consumers and a good time for vendors, because we're doing pretty well, but not all bars are very well stocked. So consumers that might be wanting to drink a little bit less aren't being able to find the choices. But now we're all at home. We all, want to kind of slip into familiar routines like that drink after work. And I think if you're wanting to explore non-alcoholic drinks, now's a really good time. You can browse from the comfort of your own home. You can order a few great completely non-alcoholic retailers online, so you can get a mixed box of stuff you can try and experiment, and you can come out the other side going, actually, I really like drinking non-alcoholic gin tonics now, and I really like drinking non-alcoholic beers. And I think there'll be a bit of power with consumers then going to their favorite venues and restaurants and going, have you thought about stocking this product? You know, I've been drinking this, I really love it, it'd be good to get you in. So I think customers can have a bit of experience to try different products and in a familiar, safe space. They don't have to question, they don't have to search, you know, they don't have to be disappointed when they go out and they don't get the product they want. They can order it in. And then I think it's a really good time for venues to be re-looking at their menu. And the restaurant industry is going to be, all of us, it's going to be a different landscape when we come out the other side. What has been important before won't be important afterwards, and there'll be new things that customers are concerned about. Health, your immunity are all going to be big on people's lists. Of course, we're all going to want to go out. We're all going to want to socialize and have nice food and nice
have a big party.
And have a big party. But I think, you know, venues have to be aware that customers, you know, they are going to be more concerned about their health. This is a great time to be working remotely with your bar managers and your teams and ordering in products, getting samples in. You know, a lot of the brands I speak to are very open to sending free samples and products out to people in their homes, have a play around. There's lots of support. I think brands are going to really want to support venues, and venues can support brands. So I think now is a great time to go, do you know what, let's bring a new menu out. We're going to be doing deals, offers. We're going to be wanting to kind of entice people in. So you can start the ball rolling with that, do some experiments, get them out on your socials, drive a little bit.
Yeah, I was about to say, you know, it's a great time to kind of almost ask your audience, you know, what do you want to see? Yeah. What are you, you know, what are you drinking at home? What do we need to get on our menus for when we reopen? And no, I think, you know, you're right. I think there's going to be a good mix, and certainly, like I say, health and sort of well-being is going to be pretty high up the agenda. Like I said, we're going to want to get out and, you know, have a bit of a, you know, fresh air, breathe, and everything else. It's, you know, escapism. But at the same time, I think there's going to be quite a lot of conscious sort of decisions made, which have obviously been happening whilst we've sort of been in lockdown and stuff. So. You know, so I completely agree. I think venues need to think, you know, and you know, they take this opportunity whilst it is in almost to not necessarily reinvent the sort of think about their concept and how can they improve it, you know, coming out the other side, and what can be done. So so moving on from that to sustainability, so the other sort of thing that you kind of you sort of you know, work on, what you know, how does that kind of work? What's the sort of...
So it's all about, you know, we've got to a point now where within the hospitality industry, within business in general, we need to have a more socially responsible attitude to the way we do business. You know, it's no longer acceptable to, you know, be profit driven completely, to be just focusing on getting that product out at whatever cost. It's like there needs to be a traceability in the way that people do business. There needs to be a traceability to where people are sourcing their food from, or sourcing their products from. And I think, you know, we are aware of the climate situation that we're in. We are aware that we're living in quite a fragile ecosystem right now. COVID-19 is a perfect example of that. And I think businesses need to look at the all-round sustainable positioning. We're seeing a lot more new brands coming in that are B Corp registered, which is great. People are really trying to take the time to think, okay, every little segment of my business, how am I being sustainable? How am I making sure that I'm putting my people first, putting my product first, and showing that there's traceability. And the brand, there are lots of interesting, wonderful brands that are coming out at the moment that are focusing on that. And I think it's responsible business practice, then it needs to be at the forefront. It can't just be a little paragraph in your corporate social responsibility bit in the end of your handbook. It has to be, you know, people really have to have a more holistic approach around it.
It needs to, well, I say it needs to be much more sort of driven into your values, doesn't it? And almost at the forefront, I think, these days with what you're doing, and it's got to, for me, it's got to kind of resonate with every single area of your business.
It's got to be, it's got to be honest, and it can't just be that little, you know, a little tiny segment. Like you said, it's got to be wrapped around the whole package, and it's got to be something that's thought out, and it can't just be a little buzzword, because everything is much more transparent these days, whether you make it transparent or not, and it will come across very quickly. Your customers will find out, if you are pretending that you're, just not using any plastic straws in your bar, but then you're wasting huge amount of plastic packaging in everything else, or if the way down to the way you treat your staff. And I think it's not just about a sustainable business, isn't just about not having plastic straws. It's about the whole 360 vision and image of your business and your brand, down to the people, down to the product, down to the sourcing. And we're seeing lots of interesting things that can help you do that in the food business. Blockchain technology, I think, is something that we're going to see a lot more of, where people really wanting to trace each stage of the journey of the food and the products that they're using. And I think that people who are caring more about their food now, they're caring more about where it comes from, and brand owners and products can no longer kind of fluff over with fresh and natural and put certain buzzwords onto their marketing. We really need to understand where our food is coming from, and we need to understand that that's going to be visible and traceable for customers. So I think there's going to be lots of technology that we're going to see is going to be really helpful to do that. And again, it's something that it needs to be the full package. It can't just be a little blur.
It's kind of moved on from where you can just say, "Oh, we changed our light bulbs to be low, exactly. to be low energy," but it like I say, it's more than just that kind of environmental side, isn't it? It's there's sustainability and how you run your business becomes, and it's those morals and values that you hold within your business, and it can't just be well, this is what I believe. Is the whole team that are within that business also need to have the same sort of values, and it is quite interesting, because obviously for years we've had, I suppose, locally sourced menus and things like this, and that's kind of been there. But what I've certainly noticed myself on social media and stuff, when I've kind of, sort of seen stuff people sort of saying, is that, they're almost through this period of lockdown, they've almost got a sense again of, to buy local again. And so, people have been buying from the local butcher and, whatever it might be, and even getting deliveries in and stuff. So I suppose that's going to become even more prominent again, isn't it? That actually, you meant, where your food is going to be sourced, and the other thing, obviously, you mentioned there is, it's fine, if you, get rid of plastic straws at the front, but then you've got loads of plastic coming in through your supply chain. Do restaurants need to be more vocal back to the supply chain of saying, look, stop wrapping bloody cucumbers in plastic, for crying out loud? I've never quite understood why that is.
I think so, and I think there's the power. You might think you're only a small business, but there's the power in the collective. The Sustainable Restaurant Association is a great support network for that as well. And you're right. In my juice bar, I used to get a box of 50 passion fruits, and each one was individually wrapped in plastic, and my staff would spend half an hour unwrapping them, and you just think, oh God. But together, if you do talk to your fruit and veg supplier and you do say, look, I don't want anything in plastic, I want you just to give me the loose products, they will do it. They'll grumble a little bit, but they will do it. And anything that comes to you, boxes, cardboard, get on the phone to them, get to collect it when they next come, and to keep reusing stuff. And I think the power is in restaurants to kind of act as a bit of a force on that as well, certainly. And it's interesting you said about shopping local, because I think we've realized the fragility of our food system. We're facing a pandemic because of a broken food system, most likely. And we're realizing the value in shopping local, in ordering veg boxes from, farms out in the local area, and from going to our small independents. The thought of queuing for 45 minutes outside Sainsbury's, going into what could be a myriad of germs on my shopping trolley, to then facing empty shelves, you're just thinking, I'm not going to bother. So you're going to see people, I think, thinking differently about how they buy their products. So maybe I'm going to get all my boring stuff, my loo roll and my toilet cleaner, I'm going to get that online, I'm going to get that delivered, and then I'm going to go to my smaller bulk store to get dried goods, and I might go to a local farm shop. And we've been kind of sucked into this wonderful world of convenience, and it has been amazing just being able to go and do a big shop once a week and get everything you need, or be able to go to the supermarket at 11:30 at night on your way home from whatever. But unfortunately, we're going to have to make changes to our lifestyle that are going to be a bit uncomfortable to begin with, that are going to seem to be putting us out. However, we're very adaptable as humans, and we will get used to a new system, and I think we'll see the benefits. I'm hardly going to go back to my big supermarket after finding some really nice little independent stores in my area that I didn't even know was there. And giving them support and business at this time feels good as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's a great, opportunity again for us to make these changes, and kind of hopefully, good amount of people will, will sort of obviously continue to sort of support them as we go forward. And, I think for me, for sort of our industry, that thought process of, how do we improve some of these systems and almost, start to think about that message that they're going to put out, sort of post lockdown to, start to engage more. And it becomes that engagement, doesn't it? Build that relationship with your customers, that and get these proper messages across that you might have been doing before, but you weren't really thinking about it. Whereas now they kind of need to, don't they? A lot more.
Yeah. And there's a perfect opportunity for brands to really communicate with their customers. That's, restaurants or individual brands, because that's all you have right now. And I think the brands and the businesses that are trying to reach out to their customers, whether that's through online, whether that's through utilizing their databases from their reservation systems, and really kind of trying to engage with their customers. It's not about the sell. It's not about, we all know that restaurants are going to want you back in when everything kind of gets up and running again. But if you've been sending interesting content to your customers, giving them vouchers to come in when they when they come in and make their first booking, these reservation systems that restaurants have, it's a huge database of information, and they're really great to use in times to really reach out with some meaningful content now. And I think the brands that do try and look after their customers, do try and engage with them, are going to be the ones that at the other side, people are going to have that added loyalty to. And you're seeing some great virtual pub quizzes. Brewdog was a great example of that. Virtual cocktail hours, whether it be really interesting bits of content, which again aren't sales driven. They're just trying to inform their customers on things they're doing. That could be about your products. It could be about ingredients. It could be about stuff that's going on in society, arts, culture, and giving your customers a connection with you when you physically can't have a connection to them. I think we're seeing some really lovely content come out from brands and businesses. And those are the ones that people straight away are going to be like, I want to go and see them first. So there's some really valuable time right now.
Do you think there's an opportunity, obviously, because we talked about, shopping habits changing, moving a bit away from obviously your larger sort of brands to the independents? This is a great opportunity for independents to make a bit of a statement as well, isn't it? The smaller, individual units, or maybe just small groups of 3 or 4 restaurants, to say, look, we're here, we've been doing this, and we do it much better because we are more community.
Yeah, it is. And I think people will start to realize the value in that as well. With bigger brands, with whether that be restaurant chains, whether that be big retail, I think there can be that, you don't feel that special. And a lot of the times you're not, because it's very hard to make hundreds of thousands of people feel special. But I think people are either going to come out of this with not very much money because they've, lost their jobs and have been in quite dire situations, or actually there'll be quite a few people that have been furloughed and have probably saved a lot of money. And there's going to be people that want to go out and spend some money when they get out the other side. And you're going to be really thoughtful in where you spend that money. And I think the messaging that smaller brands can get out of about their provenance, about their story, about where their ingredients come from, and about adding that little bit extra to the experience that you have with them, they'll be the ones that people are going to come back to straight away. So it is a good opportunity, certainly, to reconnect.
Yeah, no, definitely. So what's general sort of thoughts then at the minute with where do you kind of see us sort of going? What's your...
Well, I mean, it's difficult. We usually had a crystal ball to kind of see what's going to happen. I think, you know, this won't be forever. This situation things will get back to normal. It's not going to be very quickly. It's going to take a lot longer. And I think once all the doors are open and, you know, we've all got free reign again, we're still going to face a bit of a mental block where we've got very used to not being in very big crowded spaces. We've got very used to, you know, not being in the hustle and bustle of everyday life. We've lived with a bit of fear, a lot of people, and we've kind of started to have different habits that have become ingrained, and it takes 40 days to form habits. So we've had over that now of people changing the way that they live their lives. So I think it is going to be a bit of a slower pace to get back in. People are going to be a little bit wary, you know, certainly big trade shows, big events, big festivals, even if we're kind of fully back open, people might be wary about going to events with, you know, thousands of people. And I think brands need to be sensitive to that. And I think we need to understand that it is going to be a bit of a slow process, but it won't be forever, and it will get back to normal. And I think brands just have to keep engaging with their customers, to keep making sure that they're offering the products that are kind of needed. So delivery, e-commerce, we've seen brands very quickly develop e-commerce shops in a matter of weeks. Restaurants that maybe didn't do delivery are now looking at delivery platforms. Brands are looking at more online retailers. And so how we get our products and services out to people is going to change. And I think we just need to be every day just keeping an eye on stuff and communicating with customers and with clients. And by doing that, we can kind of adapt to the changes as they happen, because there's very much take each week as it comes right now. It's hard to get some solid framework.
Yeah. And you know, like you say, if we talk about delivery there, it's kind of you've almost got to now think about, you know, your restaurant and then potentially a hybrid through the delivery. Like I say, if you've not done it before, it's how do you do that, and how do you, you know, I've always been a little bit against delivery personally, but that's because, you know, I come from that background of being a chef, and if I'm creating a dish and putting it on a plate, and then, you know, I want the customer to enjoy it in the environment that I've created and in the way that I've created it. Whereas, you know, so I suppose, you know, if you're going to take that sort of leap into that sort of area, you know, you've got to start to think about, well, how do we actually, you know, almost take the restaurant to the consumer in a better way than has been before, because it becomes that experience, or, you know, experiential type, you know, sort of model, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I'm the same. You know, the food that you get, that your chefs have worked hard to produce, this beautiful dish, it gets sloshed around in the back of a, you know, delivery driver's bike, and it never looks the same, and it's not the right temperature, and everything's mushed into each other. And if something's been forgotten, you can't just nip back to the kitchen and put it on. And the experience, all the beautiful environment that you've worked very hard to create in your restaurant, you know, have they got cutlery? Are they eating it on their knees? Are they just eating it out of the warm, moist bit of packaging that you've given them? And so the experience has totally changed. But I think we are going to move more to a delivery-based culture. You know, the States are much further ahead of us with their relationship with delivery, that get delivery all the time for, you know, lots more different occasions than we do in the UK. It's, to begin with, this being, you know, very much like a takeaway was a bit of a treat. And it was like, you know, Friday night, you might get a takeaway and you might get delivery. But certainly younger people living in urban areas with hectic lifestyles, we are seeing delivery getting more and more popular. And situations like this, where there may be people that don't want to go out and eat at restaurants for a while. They may have had the illness. They may have had, you know, a bit more kind of fear related to it. So there are going to be a lot more people that go, oh, do you know what, we'll just order something in. So I think as venues and restaurateurs, you have to look at, like you said, how you can adapt your product to that experience. So it's the type of foods that you're going to send out in delivery. You know, there are certain foods that you just won't be able to, or you shouldn't really want to be able to give out to your delivery platform, because it just won't be delivered the way it should be. So it takes a bit of creativity on your menu development. And, you know, maybe you have a separate menu that is for your delivery, and that also entices people to deliver. Or you go, we're going to have a dark kitchen. We're going to have a ghost brand that lives on Deliveroo, that we do our 5 best sellers, and it's going to live on a delivery platform, and it's not going to be connected to our restaurant. So there's not that kind of branding consistency. I think we'll see a lot more venturing up dark kitchens because,
Mm.
you know, the state of rates and having to pay lots of staff and, you know, all the other fun issues that come along with having a restaurant, where you can actually make a really good turnover with just a kitchen unit on an industrial estate and a beautiful brand that just lives on the delivery space. So I think it's going to change how venues approach that, certainly.
Yeah, one thing I've seen, which I thought was really great, and I think, you know, again, could be an opportunity for restaurants to develop even further, is again, you don't, you know, you almost, I suppose, a bit like the HelloFresh or sort of the M&S sort of home takeaway type model, where, you know, you've got your restaurant dish that you know that customers like, and that's what they want, but you know you can't cook it in the restaurant and, like I say, comfortably transfer it to home, you know, that it's going to reach the, but what you could do is create the recipe, all the ingredients, that, you know, they can get that back to home raw, and then they can cook it at home in their own environment, you know, and I've seen that a few restaurants sort of doing that, and I think it's a great idea. I think it's almost, you know, it's another way, isn't it, to get your brand out there and keep it a revenue stream coming in as well.
Yeah, and it's, you know, people now have been, lots of people are learning stuff. I think it's probably more sourdough starters that have been bought from shops in the last couple of months than anything else. People have got into making stuff and actually cooking a bit more. So I think that's going to be something that maybe people didn't even realize they liked cooking before now, or could never really be bothered. And now they've got into the habit of it. So maybe they want to do a build your own sushi from your favorite restaurant. You get all the different components, you get a branded sushi mat, you can make your own product, or maybe it's a pizza that you know, I ordered a pizza the other day and it was kind of a bit cold and it's a bit disappointed. Just either don't cook it and people finish it off in their own oven, or, you know, there's lots of ways that you can feel part of that cooking process. You can also brand that up beautifully. There can be other merch that goes along with it. You can pair it with drinks. I think that's a really interesting route, certainly. I think people's attitude towards food is going to change, definitely. I think people are falling in love with food a little bit more now.
Yeah, well, like I say, yeah. You know, no. Well, no, but you're right, because, like I say, there's going to be an element of people that will be fine. Yeah, we will go out and we'll happily sit in a restaurant, blah blah blah, and all this sort of thing. But like I say, there's going to be the other element that are going to be a bit more. Oh, well, actually, no, we don't want to. Say they might have either had, or they've got either underlying conditions or whatever it might be, and they're still going to be a little bit wary, because it is. You know, we know that this is. You know. I know I do say to people, you know, I think we do always seem to have a bit of a short memory of stuff, don't we? You know, once things get back open, you know, we it's just natural, isn't it? It's just things sort of, you know, oh yeah, well, that COVID-19, that was years ago, wasn't it? You know,
it wasn't that bad.
Exactly. So there will be that element, but I think there will, like I say, another element that is going to sort of, you know, sort of stay at home. And I think you're going to have to. There's, like I say, there's going to be more emphasis in restaurants on things like the hygiene, you know, putting things in place, isn't there? That's going to give that reassurance to the consumer.
Yeah, restaurants, like you said, they're going to have to be a bit more transparent, and they're going to have to realize that it's going to be a fragile environment that they're going to reopen into. People, like you said, are going to care much more about hygiene. They're going to want to see that they're doing their checks and balances and really, you know, adhering to new legislations that are going to come in. They're also going to want to receive their food a bit differently. They're also going to be eating and drinking different things. So there's loads of different things that are going to change slightly that I think restaurateurs, venues need to be thinking about now to when they get the doors back open. Also, something which I think is going to be really key is your customers are going to be a little bit fragile, but your staff are going to be a little bit fragile. They're going to be a lot of people that have had quite a tough time mentally, let alone financially, over these past couple of months. Hopefully it won't be more than a couple of months, but we don't really know. You know, mental health issues within the hospitality sector are, you know, really high, you know, especially among chefs, especially among people that are, you know, working in alcoholic venues, that, you know, the industry lends itself to substance abuse, to people getting themselves exhausted. And there's a lot of, certainly I've seen with in my work in the last couple of years, there seems to be a lot more people that are a bit more delicate and that are going to need that extra support. And so businesses need to understand that, as well as making sure their staff have got a new cleaning checklist that means they're sanitizing things more, we need to make sure that brands are looking after their staff, and, you know, having that other element of managers need to be training up to understand that their staff might be more delicate, and to see signs, and to make sure that HR are open to having more honest conversations with people, and that there are things put in place to be looking after the mental health of their staff, because I think there's going to be a fragile workforce coming back to work.
Yeah, well, no, it's a huge. To be fair, I interviewed Andrew Clark on the podcast. That's what the podcast that's about to go out in the next sort of few days. We talked about obviously that side of it. To be fair, I'm actually also working with another client at the moment who is developing an exactly something like that to support staff. You know, for and focusing on chefs as a starter, but where, you know, like I say, it's that almost that support network that needs to be put in place, and mental health is sort of top of that list as well on what he's doing. So so I think again there's going to be some interesting innovations in that where, you know, what employers can do to, you know, to sort of really, you know, open up, because no, I agree. I think there's going to be, you know, as there always is in these sort of situations, a lot of underlying things that we haven't thought about that you know, we can't just go, you know, say we cannot just reopen the doors and go back to how we were, you know. I seriously don't believe that at all. I think you've got to put everything in place now to actually be much better than before, because if you just stick to how you were 2 or 3 months ago, then you're just going to crash and burn a lot quicker, aren't you? And the consumer will make that point.
They will know. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the smart people, and the people that really care about their brand, and the people that live up to all the values that they preach about, they are going to be preparing now, and they are, you know, we are realizing that it's going to be a very different environment when we reopen. And you're right, the businesses that don't take heed to that, they won't last, because people just, you know, your time and your energy and your money is valuable, and the brands that don't adapt, they won't last.
Yeah. So do you know, on that side of it with staff, you know, what's your thoughts with what the industry needs to do? Obviously, a big thing at the minute that's kind of obviously come to point is obviously, you know, with the government job retention scheme, you know, they haven't included troncs in that. You know, is that something that needs to be got rid of, in your opinion? Do we need to be sort of saying, do you know what, it's time to actually pay the staff what they're worth, and not kind of have it supplemented?
Yeah, I think a trunk's been a bone of contention for a long time in the industry. You know, there are still a lot of employees which, you know, some of them you can't blame them because they're trying to save every penny, but a lot of them definitely should know better, where you're paying your staff minimum wage and then you're supplementing the rest of their wage by their trunk. And in situations like this where, you know, staff, yes, they might be getting paid 80% of their wage, but actually it's realistically probably 50%, maybe less sometimes, because trunk adds such a huge amount of value onto the pay packet. I think, you know, businesses are going to have to, certainly in London, they're getting up to scratch with the London living wage. You know, the London living minimum wage is a lot more than the government minimum wage. I think it's up to £10.50. So it's something that businesses really need to be looking at. Trunk is something that, it's gone on for forever, to kind of how it should be dealt with, how it should be taxed. You know, it still is getting taxed, and that's another, we could talk about a whole podcast on service charge, I think. But I think employers, they're going to need to start paying better and not just relying on trunk to supplement wages. It's a very old school mentality. However, equally, there's a lot of businesses going to come out, and that could be a bit of a lifeline for them, not having to pay the full wage. So it's a case by case thing, I think.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so you know, what's your kind of I suppose what should we summarise of what you think, you know, we really need to be focused on, sort of to get ready to go again, as it were, relaunch?
Yeah, I think we need to be thinking about taking this time to communicate with your customers and really get some kind of honest understanding of what it is that they're wanting when it comes out the other side. Making sure that you're adapting your menus and your systems into how you're going to behave when we're coming out the other side, and understanding how your staff are going to be behaving the other side, and how you need to make sure that you're putting in place systems to help protect them. You know, there are going to be people who are going to be using that as a bit of a new area of consultancy and support, I think, is in looking at how to upskill managers and to help staff to deal with mental health and to deal with issues that their staff are having. And I think taking that time to look at your products and to look at what you're serving and how you're serving it, and to really use this time to start to understand the digital landscape if you're not, because we're having a little bit of taste now of the future of how we're going to rely on digital and the online space a lot more than we do. And I think getting in, whether that's making sure you've got a solid e-commerce platform set up, making sure you are on the delivery platforms, like we said, looking at your menus and your offering to work out if they're going to work on delivery, or if there can be some innovative make at home or recipe box ideas that are going to come out of this. But as it happens this time now, it's a blessed bit of space that we have amongst all the madness. It's like we've also been giving this space now to really have no excuse to think, to reset things, to change things. And you know, it's very hard to change something when you're in the flow, but it's like you can just scrap your menu and start again. You can completely change your systems. You can completely change the way you incentivize your staff. And now you have a perfect chance to start afresh. That never happens. So it's use it, don't lose it. Basically.
No, brilliant. No, I completely agree. So if people want to talk to you about low and no or sustainability and business, cleanslate.co.uk, is it?
Cleanslate.co.uk, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn. LinkedIn
and stuff like that. Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been really, really interesting. So cool. Thank you.
Great talking to you. Take care.